For as long as I could remember, I had dreamed of owning a house far away from the noise, the chaos, and the endless rules of city life. I wanted a place where I could breathe, where the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant owl. A place where I could live on my own terms. That dream finally came true when I found Pinecrest. Pinecrest was a small, secluded property deep in the forest, miles from the nearest town. It was perfect. The house was a modest log cabin with a wraparound porch, nestled between towering pines. A small creek ran through the backyard, and the only way in and out was a private dirt road I'd clear myself. It was rugged, uneven, and most importantly mine. No one else had access to it, and that was exactly how I liked it. For the first time in years, I felt free. I spent months making the cabin my own, chopping wood, fixing the roof, and planting a small garden. It was hard work, but it was worth it. Every evening, I would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the sounds of the forest. It was pure freedom, but that freedom was about to be shattered. One crisp morning, as I stepped outside with my coffee, I noticed something at the entrance of my road. A small white sign had been staked into the ground. From a distance, it looked official bold black lettering, clean edges like something put there by authority. I frowned. I hadn't ordered any construction, and this was my land. No one should be putting anything here without my permission. As I got closer, the words came into focus: property of Pinecrest HOA. Members only beyond this point. I actually laughed out loud. HOA. There was no homeowners association out here. I had made sure of that before I bought the place. My property was completely outside the limits of the nearest community. There was no way this applied to me. Still, the sign annoyed me. It wasn't just the words, it was the arrogance behind them. Someone had come onto my land without permission and claimed it. I yanked the sign out of the ground and tossed it into the back of my truck. Probably just a mistake, I thought. Maybe some HOA in town had put it in the wrong place. No big deal. At least that's what I thought. A few days later, I drove into town to pick up supplies. VYing off the grid meant stocking up when I could gasoline for the generator, food for the week, maybe even a stop at the local diner for a decent burger. It was just a normal trip. But when I came back, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My driveway was gone. Where my private road had once been, there was now a solid metal gate, black iron bars stretched across the entrance, secured with a heavy-duty padlock. There was no way in. I slammed on the brakes, so hard my truck skidded on the dirt road. My stomach twisted as I jumped out, storming up to the gate. I gripped the freezing cold metal between my fingers. It was real, solid, permanent, and there, bolted right onto it, was a brand new sign: private community access. HOA members only. I stood there for a long moment, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. I wasn't in their community. This wasn't their road. This was my land. And yet, somehow, they had locked me out of my own home. I didn't waste any time. The second I saw that gate barring me from my own damn property, I threw my truck into reverse and sped toward town. My hands were gripping the wheel, so tight my knuckles were white. I didn't care if I had to tear through every office in the county. I was getting answers. The Pinecrest HOA had a small, sleek office right in the middle of town, sandwiched between a bank and a yoga studio. It had one of those fake-friendly signs out front: Pinecrest HOA, building a better community together. I yanked open the glass door so hard it rattled in its frame. Inside, the air smelled like fake lemon cleaner and overpriced perfume. The walls were lined with framed pictures of smiling families and neatly trimmed lawns. A small, gray-haired receptionist looked up from her desk, startled. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice overly sweet. "Yeah," I snapped, barely keeping my temper in check. "I need to speak to whoever's in charge." She hesitated, clearly deciding whether or not I was worth the trouble. Then, before she could answer, a sharp, clipped voice rang out from behind her. "I'll handle this, Diane." A woman stepped into VYEW, and the moment I saw her, I knew she was trouble. Margaret Hayes, HOA president. Smug, ruthless, and smelling like expensive perfume and bad intentions. She was in her late 50s, dressed in a perfectly pressed gray pantsuit. a clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. Her blonde hair was styled into one of those stiff, helmet-like cuts that didn't move when she walked. She gave me a tight-lipped smile, the kind that looked practiced and fake. "Ah," she said, glancing at me like I was something she had stepped in. "You must be Mr. Carter." I frowned. I hadn't introduced myself. "I know exactly who you are," she continued, adjusting her clipboard. "We've been meaning to have a little chat." I clenched my jaw. "Good. Then let's talk. Why the hell is there a gate across my driveway?" Margaret smiled like I had just asked her to pass the salt at dinner. "Oh, that's just a little adjustment," she said smoothly. "You see, your property is now under Pinecrest HOA jurisdiction." I stared at her. I actually laughed at a sharp, bitter sound. "No, it's not. I live off-grid, outside HOA boundaries. I made damn sure of that before I bought the place." She made a mocking little tisk sound and flipped open her clipboard. "Well, things change, Mr. Carter. Over the past few months, the HOA has been expanding. We recently purchased the land surrounding your road, which legally makes it part of our community now." My blood turned to ice. This wasn't just some clerical error. They had planned this. "You don't own my road," I said slowly, my voice low and dangerous. She arched a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "Technically, we own the land around your road. And since it now falls within HOA boundaries, well, it's only fair that you contribute, don't you think?" I gritted my teeth. "I don't need to contribute to anything, Margaret." She tilted her head, like she was dealing with a particularly slow student. "Well," she said, "if you want to use our road, you need to become a member of the Pinecrest HOA." She said it sweetly, like she was doing me some kind of favor. I folded my arms. "And if I refuse?" Margaret's smile widened. "Then I guess you'll have to find another way home." I wanted to punch a hole in the wall. It was clear now this wasn't about roads or rules. They were trying to trap me, force me into the HOA, make me play by their rules and pay their ridiculous fees. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my anger in check. "My deed is clear," I said, my voice like steel. "That land is mine. You don't get to just claim it." Margaret shrugged, completely unbothered. "Well, you're welcome to take it up with the county," she said lightly. "But these things take, months, maybe years." She smiled, knowing exactly what she was doing. "In the meantime, the road stays closed. For safety reasons, of course." I clenched my fist so hard my nails dug into my palms. This woman was blocking me from my own damn house, and there was nothing I could do about it. Margaret adjusted her clipboard and gave me one final smug look. "I'd think about signing up, Mr. Carter," she said, her tone condescending. "I'd hate for this to get difficult." Then she turned on her heel and walked away, Leah VYing me standing there, shaking with rage. I had two choices, give in or fight back. And I sure as hell wasn't about to let Margaret Hayes win. That same afternoon, after my little meeting with Margaret Hayes, I drove straight back to my land, parked my truck right in front of that damn gate, and grabbed my bolt cutter from the toolbox. If they thought I was just going to roll over and accept this, they had another thing coming. The lock was thick, but not indestructible. I lined up the cutters, gritting my teeth as I squeezed. "Step away from the gate." A voice rang out behind me. I froze, turning around slowly. I saw two men in black security uniforms standing a few yards away, HOA security. On my land. One of them was a stocky guy with a buzz cut, arms crossed over his chest like he thought he was some kind of enforcer. The other, taller and skinnier, rested his hand casually on the batten at his hip. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I snapped. The stocky one probably the muscle tilted his head toward the gate. "That's private HOA property." I actually laughed. "You're joking, right? This is my driveway. My house is right up that road." The taller guy smirked. "Not according to the records, sir. As of last month, this road falls under Pinecrest HOA jurisdiction. And you're trespassing." My grip on the bolt cutters tightened. "You're telling me I'm trespassing on my own damn property?" The muscle took a step closer. "That's how it works. If you're not part of the HOA, you don't have access." I stared at them, my blood boiling. They were actually serious. "You touch that gate," the taller one added, "and we'll have to call the authorities." I wanted to tell them to go to hell, but I wasn't stupid. Margaret had made sure this was tied up in legal nonsense, and if I started cutting through their lock, I'd be the one getting arrested. So I did the hardest thing I've ever had a doy step back. The stocky one gave me a satisfied nod. Smart choice. I didn't say another word. I threw the bolt cutters back in my truck, climbed inside, and peeled out of there. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I drove to the county office, ready for war. I had all my documents, me deed, proof of purchase, even satellite images showing my road untouched by HOA boundaries. I figured once I showed them the EPIC Denke, they have to fix this. But the clerk at the counter barely even looked at my paperwork. You'll need to file a formal complaint, she said, VYing a stack of forms toward me. It'll go through our EW process. How long will that take? I asked. She adjusted her glasses. Could be 6 to 8 months before we can even schedule a hearing. I clenched my jaw. I can't wait 6 months. They blocked my only access. I can't even get home. She just gave me a polite, empty smile. I'm sorry, sir. That's the process. I want to grab my paperwork and throw it across the room. This wasn't just bureaucracy, this was intentional. Margaret Hayes had connections. She had set this up knowing damn well that by the time I got through all the red tape, I'd already be broken down enough to join the HOA. But she underestimated me. I wasn't about to break. A few days passed, and things got worse. It started with my truck tires. I had driven into town for supplies, parked in my usual spot outside the grocery store, and when I came back, every single tire was slashed 4 deep gashes, clean and precise. Not random vandalism. This was a message. I stood there, fists clenched, staring at the damage. The HOA security guy sit had to be them. I paid for a tow, got the tires replaced, and drove home fuming. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Margaret Hayes' smug smile. But the next morning, I woke up to something even worse. I flicked the light switch. Nothing. Try the coffee maker. Dead. Even my fridge wasn't humming. The power was out. I stomped outside, checking my generator. Full tank. No issues. I called the electric company, and after 30 minutes of hold music, a bored-sounding rep finally answered. Yeah, looks like your connection was temporarily suspended, she said. I frowned. Suspended? Why? Says here that Pinecrest HOA requested a SARE VYC adjustment for the area. Looks like you were marked as a non-member, so you're not on the SARE VYC list. I almost crushed my phone in my fist. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously calm. The HOA told you to shut off my power. That's what it looks like. You can file a dispute, but that usually takes a couple of weeks. I hung up. I didn't need to hear any more excuses. By now it was clear. The gate was just the beginning. Margaret Hayes and her little HOA goons were trying to squeeze me out. First, they blocked my road. Then they sabotaged my truck. And now they were cutting off my ability to live on my own land. I wasn't stupid. I knew they wanted me frustrated, desperate. They wanted me to come crawling to their office and beg for HOA membership. They wanted control. But I had one advantage. They thought I was just some stubborn homeowner, some guy who'd eventually fold. They had no idea who they were messing with. That night, I decided to take the old hiking trail up to my house. It was an easy path steep covered in thick brush, but I had used it a few times before when I wanted to go off the beaten path. But about halfway up the trail, I stopped. Something was wrong. The hairs on my arms stood up. I felt like I was being watched. And then I saw Ida's small black VYC mounted high on a tree. A camera. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. And then I saw another. And another. There were cameras hidden along the trail, watching, recording. I took a slow step back, my heart pounding. This wasn't about keeping me out anymore. They were monitoring me like I was some kind of criminal, like they were waiting for me to make a move. I turned around and walked back to my truck, keeping my expression neutral. Because in that moment, I knew I had two choices, give in or fight back. And if Margaret Hayes thought I was just going to lie down and let her win, she had no idea what was coming next. I knew I couldn't just charge in guns blazing and take the HOA down by brute force. Margaret Hayes and her little army of clipboard warriors had power, connections. If I tried to fight them head-on, I get buried in legal nonsense fast. But if there was one thing I had learned from watching them, they weren't untouchable. They thought they could play dirty. Fine. I was about to beat them at their own game. The first thing I did was hire a land surveyor. I needed proof solid, undeniable evidence that the HOA's land grab was completely illegal. It didn't take long to find someone willing to help. Small-town professionals tend to talk, and the minute I mentioned the Pinecrest HOA, the guy just sighed and muttered, "Yeah, I've heard they pull shady stuff like this before." That was all I needed to hear. A few days later, I had the results in my hands, and it was even worse than I expected. The surveyor confirmed that the land around my driveway had never legally transferred ownership to the HOA. They had filed the paperwork, but it was incomplete. The county office had never finalized the sale, which meant the HOA had no right to block my road. I stared at the documents, a slow grin spreading across my face. Now I just needed one final push to bring them down. I spent the next few days setting up my own cameras. If they were going to spy on me, I'd spy right back. I mounted small, high-resolution cameras in the trees near my gate, angled just right so they wouldn't be noticeable unless someone really looked. Then I waited. Sure enough, it didn't take long. One night, around 11 p.m., I got an alert on my phone. My cameras had picked up movement. I opened the feed and saw two HOA board members, dressed in dark clothes, sneaking around my property. They were on my land trespassing. They moved cautiously, looking over their shoulders like they knew they weren't supposed to be there. One of them pulled something out of his pocket, a small black device. I squinted. A signal jammer. The bastards were trying to disable my cameras. I grinned. Too bad for them. I had backups. And now I had them on video, committing a crime. But I wasn't done. I wanted one final touch, something that would make sure Margaret Hayes never forgot this lesson. So I rigged their precious gate with a little surprise. I modified the lock, placing a small ink pack inside, the kind banks use in money bags to mark thieves. Yeah, that kind. The next time Margaret and her cronies came to inspect their gate, she'd get a face full of bright, permanent blue ink. I set up my cameras to make sure I wouldn't miss a second of it. Then I sat back and waited. It only took 2 days. Mid-morning, while I was in town grabbing coffee, my phone buzzed. Motion detected at the gate. I pulled up the live feed and nearly choked on my coffee. There she was, Margaret Hayes, standing at the gate with her clipboard, smug as ever. She reached for the lock. I leaned forward, holding my breath. A blast of thick blue ink exploded right in her face. She staggered back, screaming, hands flying. The other board members standing behind her stared in horror. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Margaret was covered her perfect pantsuit, now splattered with ink, her blonde hair streaked with electric blue. She looked like a furious, dripping Smurf. She screamed something unintelligible, flailing in rage. The other board members tried to help, but none of them wanted to touch her. I wiped tears from my eyes, still laughing. And just to make things better, I sent the footage straight to the local news. Let's just say Margaret Hayes' humiliation was about to go public. The second Margaret Hayes' ink-covered meltdown hit my phone, I knew exactly what to do. This wasn't just some petty neighborhood dispute anymore. They had illegally stolen my land, sabotaged my property, and harassed me for weeks. It was time to end them. I spent the next few hours going through the footage from my cameras, every single trespassing incident, every shady HOA goon sneaking around my property, the security guards threatening me, and of course, Margaret Hayes' blue-faced explosion at the gate. It was gold. Then I sent it everywhere. First to the local news. I made sure they got every clip: the nighttime trespassing, the vandalism, the part where Margaret smugly told me I had no choice but to join the HOA. But I didn't stop there. I emailed it to every homeowner I could find who had ever complained about the Pinecrest HOA. I even posted it to community forums and social media. By the time I was done, half the town had seen it, and people were pissed. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. Margaret Hayes' face was all over local Facebook groups and news sites. One headline read, "Pinecrest HOA president caught trespassing and gets a prize of her own." Another one, "HOA leader goes viral after sabotaging homeowner's property and gets instant karma." The footage of her screaming in blue ink had been shared thousands of times. And the best part? She had a court hearing the next day. I wasn't done yet. With the EPIC denke I had, I called a lawyer not just for myself, but for every single homeowner this HOA had bullied. Turns out, there were plenty. I wasn't the only one who had been targeted over the years. Margaret and her goons had pulled the same scheme on other people, forced buy-ins, fake land grabs, fraudulent fees. When I explained everything to the lawyer, he just shook his head and said, "We can bury them." And that's exactly what we did. The next day, I showed up at the courthouse. The HOA was being sued for fraud, harassment, and illegal land seizure. I walked in feeling good, and then I saw Margaret Hayes. She was sitting at the defendant's table, still stained with streaks of blue ink. She had tried to clean it off, but the permanent dye had left patches on her neck and in her hair. She looked miserable. I took my seat. The judge, a no-nonsense older man, was already annoyed. "I've reviewed the footage submitted as EPIC denke," he said, tapping the papers in front of him. "And I must say, I'm shocked." Margaret shifted uncomfortably. The judge turned to her. "Mrs. Hayes, your organization has engaged in deceptive practices, illegal land claims, and trespassing." She opened her mouth, but the judge held up a hand. "Not to mention," he added, "this courtroom is not the place for clownish behavior or—" A chuckle rippled through the room. Margaret turned bright red. The judge went on. The HOA's land grab wasn't legal. They had never completed the paperwork, which meant the gate had to come down. The HOA was fined thousands for fraud and harassment. But the best part? Margaret Hayes was officially removed from her position as HOA president. A few days later, I stood in my driveway, watching as the HOA's contractors ripped down their precious gate. The same security guards who had threatened me before now had to stand there in silence as I smiled and took a sip of my coffee. Margaret Hayes was gone. She had been voted out of the HOA by the very people she used to control. I heard from a neighbor that she had to move out of town entirely because she had become such a public embarrassment. Couldn't have happened to a better person. And as I watched the last piece of the gate fall to the ground, I smiled. Because now this land was mine again, and no HOA was ever going to touch it. A few weeks had passed since I watched that damn gate get torn down. Life had gone back to normal, or at least what passed for normal when you just taken down a corrupt HOA and humiliated its president on a public stage. For the first time in months, I felt peace. No more cameras watching me. No more threats. No more Margaret Hayes and her army of clipboard-wielding enforcers trying to dictate what I could do on my own land. I finally had my home back. And yet, the HOA still wasn't done with me. One morning, as I was sipping coffee on my porch, a white envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address, just my name typed neatly on the front. I already had a bad feeling. I tore it open and pulled out a thick, official-looking letter. The first few lines made me choke on my coffee. "Dear Mr. Carter, we sincerely regret any misunderstandings that may have occurred in recent weeks. We deeply value all members of our community, and we wish to extend a formal invitation to welcome you as a full member of the Pinecrest HOA completely free of charge." I stared at the page, blinking. They were offering me free membership. The same HOA that stole my road, sabotaged my truck, and cut off my power was now acting like this had all been some minor misunderstanding. I kept reading. "In light of recent events, we kindly ask that you consider withdrawing any further legal action. We believe it would be in everyone's best interest to move forward in harmony as neighbors." I nearly fell on my chair laughing. They weren't just begging me to drop the lawsuit, they were trying to bribe me. They had lost, and now they were desperate. I glanced at the shredder sitting in the corner of my office. For a second, I thought about running the letter through it. But no, this deserves something better. I grabbed a lighter from the kitchen drawer, stepped outside, and held the letter over the fire pit. One flick of the flame, and the edge curled into black ash. The paper crumbled, burning away every trace of their pathetic excuse for an apology. By the time it was gone, so was every last ounce of patience I'd ever had for the Pinecrest HOA. They had tried everything to break me. They blocked my road, They threatened me. They tried to push me out of my own home. And now they thought they could buy me off with a worthless membership. I picked up my whiskey glass, raised it to the forest around me, and smirked. Nice try, Margaret. Then I took a sip, leaned back in my chair, and enjoyed the silence. Because after everything, I had won. The sun was just starting to set, casting long golden streaks through the trees. The forest around me was quiet, peaceful the way it was always meant to be. No more HOA goons lurking around, no more security guards pretending to have authority over my land. I stretched out of my deck chair, whiskey glass in hand, and glanced down the road where that damn gate used to stand, blocking me from my own home. There was now something Betterra brand new wouldn't sign. The letters were carved deep into the smooth oak, bold and clear. Private property. HOA members will be prosecuted. No friendly neighborhood slogans. No fake HOA rules. Just a clear warning. I took another slow sip of my drink, letting the weight of everything sink in. They thought they could bully me. They thought they could push me out. And now, Margaret Hayes was gone, the HOA was crippled, and my land was finally mine again. I smirked, leaning back in my chair as a cool evening air settled around me. Let's just say, they never bothered me again. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.